Well, what do you think I'm going to be reviewing today? Yep, that one. This one is certainly spectacular, and the Dolby sound is probably about as good as anything you've ever heard before. The aspect ratio is approximately 2.4 to 1 and it was shot in 4.5K, but it has been downscaled to 2K, and I expect that's the usual reason, because the special effects have to be compiled or rendered at 2K, because it already takes hours to render every frame, and putting it up to 4K would multiply that time by 4. So there's always a date within which a film has to be released, and the makers can't just say, well, take an extra couple of years, we'll wait until the special effects are ready. It's got to meet that release date, and my word, this one really did meet the release date well, because it had an estimated budget of around $200 million and it took over $1.8 billion at the worldwide box office. A spectacular success. So I think it's a bit of a surprise therefore that this is another rather basic release from Sony with no slipcover, unlike every previous Spider-Man release, and nothing in the way of leaflets or booklets within the case itself, just the 2 discs. Ordinarily, when I'm going to review a 4K disc or a Blu-ray, I ensure I never look at anyone else's review of the same title, because it is always inadvertently possible to be influenced by what someone else has said. But on this occasion, last night, I saw that Keith from Euphoria Pictures had done a quick review of this title, and I couldn't help myself. I really like what Keith does. I do value his opinion, and I thought, let's see what he thinks, because by that time I'd seen this film twice, I'd watched all the extras, and I'd made my mind up. But yet again, Keith forced me to have yet another look, and I did have another look last night after we watched Leaving Las Vegas. I first saw Leaving Las Vegas at the Haymarket when it was first released, and it looks spectacular on the big screen in there. This Blu-ray is rather poor. It's a grainy print, quite a bit of muck on it, generally doesn't give a good representation of the film, and most Blu-rays do look better than this. But it was quite good really, because immediately after screening this, I put some sequences on again from No Way Home, following what Keith had said, and it did look much better, far better in fact. If you'd watched Leaving Las Vegas and you thought that was the gold standard for how this looked in the home, this one would be the best you've ever seen. So what I did following that, because my opinion would not change that much so quickly, I got Spider-Man 2 out of the library up here. Now this one is a bit variable in places. If you remember from my original review of the first 3 Spider-Man films, they all had variable HDR, with the first one in particular being overly bright. This one is not so bright, and indeed here now we're projecting on an even bigger screen, or a bigger picture area, about 8.5 feet wide. This one looks far better than Spider-Man No Way Home on my system. The colour is better, the definition is better, and it's got that obvious filmic look, and you can see the grain, which I know some people really can't stand. There's no grain on No Way Home because, as I said, it was filmed on video, and so it's just pure video, and to me a lot of the time that is exactly how it looks, whereas this one, it is obviously a film and it stands apart on that basis. I also, and this is a Spider-Man film I really don't particularly like, The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I struggled to find a sequence in this that did the image quality justice, but in the end I found it at the very end when he's just about to save New York from the Rhino. That looked fabulous, probably just as good as Spider-Man 2, and I think it just shows the superiority once more of 35mm film, and these were super 35mm shoots if I remember correctly. Not so sure about this one, but Spider-Man 2, pretty sure. Now, anyone who's seen my original review of Spider-Man 1, 2 and 3 will have seen my 35mm print of Spider-Man 2. And I've grabbed one of the reels here. And I thought I'd show you this because how Super 35 is then used in cinemas is it's blown up to full frame. This is the leader. And it's blown up to full frame. We'll have a closer look at it here on my rewind bench. and you can see it's a full frame anamorphic, so it's all an optical process during the printing, whereby the Super 35, which goes from the sprocket to the sprocket, and if you look at a standard 35mm print for release to cinemas, you can see all the different sound formats on there. This is a Sony release, so we have SDDS, DTS, Dolby Digital, which is in between the sprockets on the left hand side there, and also the Dolby Stereo optical tracks. So that broken line next door to the optical tracks is the code for DTS, which runs off a CD-ROM in a separate player. I think it's got to be the ultimate collectible for a film. I mean, after all, this is why we call movies films, because they used to be shot on film. Some of them still are, and Christopher Nolan, Kenneth Branagh, Steven Spielberg, they still know how to shoot on film. They get the best cameramen for the purpose. But Spider-Man No Way Home, it had to be shot on video. It's justifiable. It was massive. So many special effects, and the animators, so many animation companies to do those effects. It really is spectacular, and you can't help but like it on that basis. However, as you know, I'm the biggest Spider-Man fan because I grew up as a young lad reading Spider-Man comics weekly, as detailed in my original review. And Tom Holland is great as Spider-Man. He's not the Peter Parker I knew. And that was the problem with the last series of films as well. And for me, up to now, it's only Tobey Maguire who has nailed both roles. Now, I don't think there's any doubt Tom Holland is quite a bit more capable as Spider-Man, and he is fabulous in that role. But for me, Tobey Maguire got it just about right as Spider-Man, with the quips, the positions, the poses and the action, and he was just about perfect as Peter Parker. Not everyone will agree with me, but that's one of the wonderful things about watching films. You can all disagree, but still agree that you had a good time watching them. And I certainly enjoyed the new Spider-Man. I didn't so much the first time, because I was hoping, from what I'd heard with people telling me Tobey Maguire was making a bit of an appearance, I was sort of expecting another Spider-Man film, and indeed he is still that same Peter Parker and Spider-Man, and that for me was wonderful to see. But at the end of it, I felt a little disappointed, so that isn't really fair. And what I usually do in situations like this, if I'm going to do a review, is I decide that I'm going to watch the film again. But just like Tenet, which was really confusing first time around, I thought I'll watch all the extras of this. I think there's about 80 minutes of extras. They're quite entertaining. Doesn't really give you as much information as I would have liked, but pretty entertaining, and it gave me a better feel for the characters. And that was one of the problems. I wasn't involved with the characters. I didn't feel any emotion, and I didn't particularly care about any of them. But now I was prepared, and I was prepared to accept that I was watching a new type of Spider-Man film, and this one more of a comedy than the previous, well, the first three films that I really like. And the upshot is that I enjoyed this a whole lot more the second time around. Heck, I even got involved in some of the emotion, which I wasn't expecting. But watching it as a comedy really did work for me, and I have no hesitation for recommending this for anyone who enjoys these big screen superhero action adventures or action adventure comedies, and it really is rather good. The image quality is good. It's not going to be as good as the best you see out there, but I've been thinking that maybe I should do a top 10 of my favourite 4K videos or movies shot on video, and it'll be giving me a good opportunity to compare this against some of the better ones and see how well it does really compare, because for some people movies on video is preferable, and I appreciate that. But those of us that grew up watching films, we have an appreciation for film, and you just like that natural filmic look, and I've got that in spades because I've been screening films since I was about 3 years old. One other thing I'd like to mention is at the end of the end credits, actually there are a couple of other things that go on during the end credits, so you've got to watch it all the way to the very end. But as you get towards that very end, there's a credit that goes up to say optimised for IMAX theatres. So there was a higher version of this video, this film, and that isn't on this disc. It's the 2.4, 2.35 to 1, and that's it. So maybe one day we'll get a special edition with a whole picture. However, the way these films are shot, the cameramen have lines as guidelines on the viewfinder, so they know where to crop and what is going to be missing. So you're just getting that extra height to give more impact in a cinema, and it shouldn't adversely affect the enjoyment of this if you previously saw it at an IMAX cinema. Now, the definition, I do not think, if this is how the 4K looked, or 2K as it was. If this is how it looked in IMAX theatres, I don't think the definition is there. So if this was the first film you saw at an IMAX, I urge you to go to a true IMAX if you can and see a genuine 70mm film print IMAX. They're 15 sprockets high, so you can imagine the image area that is. It's enormous, and there's nothing to compare with film for getting the best image quality, and I believe genuine IMAX is actually sharper than the human eye can take in. Now I wanted to get a few more of my SpiderMan collectibles around me for this one, and I got out for the first time, it's been wrapped up all these years in a roll, my poster for Spider-Man 2, and I tried pinning it on the shelves here with blue tack, and there was just no way I'd get two corners up there and they'd ping off before I got the third one on. And after about half an hour of struggling, I gave up on that. I thought the smaller Spider-Man 3 poster, which Barry Atwood of Independent 8 sent me years ago, I thought I'll get that up there. That one will be easy. So I had that one up there, I was ready to go, just about to press the record button, it pinged off. So I thought I'm wasting my time here, and that's why I use them as the backdrop for filming the discs up close. So I hope you've had a good view of those. My original Spider-Man poster I did have behind me for my first Spider-Man review, the 1, 2, 3. And if anyone hasn't seen that and you want to see 35mm running, then that's the one to look at. And I actually decided it would be a good idea for me to watch that video myself last night. I was really quite surprised how good it was. And so anyone who wants to see Super 8 and 35mm film, I suggest you have a look at that or another look at that. It does seem to have been quite popular in the intervening years since it's been up there. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and perhaps consider subscribing so I'll be encouraged to create more content like this again in the future. Until the next one, bye bye for now.